intellectual acuity, so I'm not impressed with it. At the same time, I am very much concerned with reference to the flag issue on a basic principle. And the basic principle is that although some Supreme Court decisions have brought a basic, obvious, plain notion of speech, of expression, and something by at least Mr. Webster's definition, and for long years by the court's definition, to be distinguished from speech, namely action, an act, and have made the two the same. And my problem with that decision, which as I recall 2 years in a row was a 5-4 decision, is that it is confusing, it is invalid, it is specious. If I say I would like to see you smacked in the mouth, that's not very nice. If I follow up and smack you in the mouth, I have committed a crime. There is a difference. And even Mr. Scalia, who went to the same high school I did after many years later, obviously after the standards had dropped, even he could not make that distinction. That was personally disappointing.
Pat, what if you took that and on the flag you didn't burn it, but you wrote an expletive on the flag? Pick your expletive.
How do you, what's the No, but here's the fallacy. Here's the fallacy. You know.
Talking to me or what?
Yeah, I'm talking to you.
Unit sensitive.
If I burn an American flag and it's someone else's flag, then you can get me for arson or something like that. But if it's my flag, I have a flag, and a flag is a symbol, and it represents this country. And I want to take my flag, which I own, red, white, and blue, and I want to make a statement with that flag, and I burn that flag. It's a symbol, and I'm trying to communicate to you something about my feeling about what's going on, what I think is going on in this country, and I burn that flag. You're saying that should be a crime because it's an action?
What I'm saying is, whether I agree with the action or not, I'm really annoyed as the very Dickens at the duplicitous nonsense the Supreme Court spews when they're not sure of what they're doing. When they're sure of what they're doing, their English is very clear. There is a cosmic and chasm of difference between action and speech. And even as recently as the Vietnam War, with reference, as you recall, pardon me, John, with the draft cards, that was brought out very vividly by the then Solicitor General. And now, as our intellectual capabilities begin to wane and our laziness takes over, we throw all this slop into something and say it's no longer meat, it's no longer potato, it's stew, and it's the law.
No, but it's still
nonsense.
It's still
nonsense.
It's still communication. It's still expression. And the burning of the draft card. You know how they won that? Because I said that's the property of the government. The draft card was really not your property. It's the property of the government. And I'm saying
there were many cases before that, and there still are, where the distinction is made. This is a mess, and you know it.
It's not a mess. If you want to talk about the Supreme Court being really mixed up, confusing, then the obscenity decisions are the worst piece of garbage.
But there's not been.
What do you mean?
There's never been a finding that that was first.
Yeah, you gotta get somebody else.
That's nonsense. There are many cases in the 30s. Right after 7.
Did you want to say something, Diane?
Say so.
Give it another line.
You want to switch seats?
Watch the book of your blood pressure's moving. Well, what I wanted to say went back to the protesting.
Yes. Go ahead.
Well, freedom of speech regarding protesting also applies to the outcome of the war. And what disturbed me about the outcome of the war, and this is, I guess, a private opinion, is that we went around congratulating each other when it came out, and then it came out from Fred Friendly and it was NBC that we had killed 150,000 people. I mean, where does humanity, where does conscience, where does higher morality come in when you have obliterated 100 to 150,000 people and destroyed several societies? I'm not saying that Stalin was right. I'm just saying let's have a sense of balance. If we run without some sense of balance, we're,
And put
we're
shack-
they're no better, we're no better than they are.
And put shackles on the press so they couldn't cover this.
Yes,
but-
now, Brad, what do you think?
No, there's actually another factor that goes back to the flag that's somewhat aggravating, I think, about this current administration and the current attitudes. Now, this is coming from a Republican and a Republican newspaper. I'm beginning to fear that we've seen some signals. First, perhaps the flag burning issue, that it's a symbol that we're almost being asked to worship instead of a concept. And therein lies the problem with this issue of burning the flag. I can't go into my father's house right now as long as I continue to have this attitude that when you begin to see signals that the country decides that its symbol is more important than its philosophies, I think you've also got some other troubles. I thought the same thing was kind of relevant through the war. Our whole basis of freedom, the way we interpret it, or don't interpret it as the case might be, is that we can see these things and report on these things and tell the stories the way we see it. And this war was worse in its own way than what occurred during Vietnam, with what you've all heard about the 5 o'clock follies, where the press for a long time was just literally fed inaccurate information and just reproduced it. And then when the press got free and really worked hard to tell the story, the whole context of the war changed. Well, there was so much control in this for a lot of different reasons, including the way the war was fought, that I don't know that we'll ever really see what the real story was. If it was good or bad, I don't imply that. But I don't think that we are going to get anywhere near the real story that we got even during Vietnam. And this was very calculated. You will be under control. Now, on the other hand, I know personally some of the reporters who are over there. I haven't been able to talk to them since they've gotten back. I know how they work and I know how they report. And they still had a lot of information. And I know that they were very frustrated with the way they were controlled. I don't think, though, we could be put in the planes to fly over. And this certainly was more an air war, a different kind of war than there's been before. So you're not going to fly over this territory and report it. And there wasn't much time to get down on the ground and go out and see how the war was being fought from that personal level of the reporter on the scene. So there was this difference that the war never evolved to a point where the press got the freedom it usually manages to wheedle its way into. So that may have been a factor of the short war. We certainly were not in any way free, in my opinion, to find our own stories.
But if I could, and I'm not going to defend the regulations, because I don't frankly know which version they had, Kuwait versus Saudi Arabia, Rod. The only thing that you have to keep in mind is that the Bill of Rights is not a suicide pact. And that was clear when you're up against a war situation in a foreign country. And I think, John, there would be a big difference between covering the Civil War in the United States 100 years ago under current Supreme Court opinions versus what restrictions there would be covering a war declared by Congress, which you did. Because keep in mind, the Constitution includes the First Amendment, but also includes the war power. And somehow, you have to balance those two. We struck the wrong balance probably in some areas. I would agree with you there, Rod, but it's not, I don't think we can analogize the Bill of Rights coverage of a war to what we want to do, for instance, with the outrageous situation that occurred in Los Angeles with our police force, where we should be able to see and hear and know everything, versus, and I think this is the dilemma the court's always had, and I'm sure the Civil Liberties Union's well aware of it. When you're in a war, there are also lives to be lost if a reporter said, I have a right to print that we're hitting this target or that target. All right, but I have a constitutional right to print that. Now, would you defend their right to print it?
Actually, I think you...
No, I'm just curious.
No, I think you're right.
No, I think you're right on that, but that's not what happened in this war.
No, take my example. I mean,
No,
we're here to have a Socratic dialogue. No, we're having a Socratic dialogue.
I don't think the press should be free to do troop movements and all that kind of thing. It's always the excuse the government says, hey, we don't want to, ship movements and troop movements and all this kind of stuff. We had this situation where they said, you are only going to be able to operate on out of pools that in places where we take you, and then your copy is going to be submitted to us, as it was, and then we're going to decide whether or not you can send that over to the United States. And so what happens is they look at the copy, and words like giddy are changed to proud, and there is a real working by the part of the government on stories that came out of Saudi Arabia, and a lot of the journalists that were out there in the pools thinking their stories were coming back, found out when they came back they never got transmitted, they haven't been transmitted yet, and this was a public relations war. And let's be honest, this started in Grenada, it was perfected in Panama, and now I don't think we will ever have a war in this country covered the way Vietnam is perhaps no paradise on this, but Vietnam was covered in a hell of a way different than these wars. Now we have the government really creating public relations way of communicating the war.
John,
That's the tragedy.
Wait a minute,
what
Chuck.
happened to the Civil Liberties Union?
Yeah, but Chuck,
You are the people who should be taking the purest position on the First Amendment.
Think of this, Chuck. We had the opportunity
What do
to
you
go
mean,
over
what
there.
happened? We tried, we went to Cheney, we were the ones that...
No, wait a minute. You are the pure defender of the First Amendment, and yet you agreed with me that apparently you would not defend a reporter's right or Rod's right to run the attack targets for tomorrow in the paper.
Of course.
Well, now wait a minute. I come to you and say, I want you as a Civil Liberties Union, just as you will defend my right to print pornography, I want you to defend my right to print the targets. Now, if you are a purist on the First Amendment, you would readily say, Chuck, I'll take your case.
No, did
Why not?
you ever hear me say that in this area that I was a purist?
No,
We have
but
a very clear policy on that. The one area is,
Okay,
in
well,
terms of the press, is
I wasn't aware of
troop
that.
movements and that, that kind of
All right.
thing. But that isn't what happened here.
No, but I wanted to throw a hypothetical.
Did everybody see the Barry's World cartoon where the general is giving the public affairs officer the big medal and he says, for manipulating the media above the This is very interesting to me because I happen to be chairman of the board of the Defense Information School where we train all these military public affairs.
Now it comes up.
Interesting point. The first 3 days that those people are at DINFOS, they get a strong series of lectures by a number of generals and admirals, star officers, about the First Amendment and their right to do all these things. And yet here Rod is telling us that maybe when the guns go off, maybe they don't do this. Let's just switch this a little. How about the fact that the government would not allow any media coverage of those killed in the war coming back to Dover, Delaware, the Air Force installation, which has become the mortuary, as it were, for our wars?
That's just an extension of what was missing here, was sort of what we call in the vernacular jargon, the street reporting. It wasn't going to be there because it wasn't going to be pretty. What I was trying to get to when you guys were bantering there was, we had the opportunity to go over as hometown media, which was kind of when things were going nice, they wanted the hometown media over there, things got touchy, they didn't want them. We were to go over with the 477th New Hampshire National Guard. We were not going to be able to talk to the members of the 477th National Guard. What was the point? Well, we want you over there to cover what they're going to do. Well, how are we going to cover what they're going to do if we're not going to be able to talk to them? Well, we'll tell you. You might even be able to sleep in the tents with them.
We filed suit on the Dover targets, by the way. We sued the government on the Dover.
Which one?
Isabel, I think you had, Kevin, right? Kevin,
Just one comment on the reporting, that I was interested in press club the other day. There was a speech by the reporter who remained in Baghdad.
Peter Arnett, yes.
That's right. And the fury of apparently many of the press of what he was doing. Now, he was working under censorship just the way some American reporters were working under censorship. Was there in fact a major difference between those two cases?
Yes, there is, very much so, because there's no Bill of Rights in Iraq.
Iraq's pulling the shot on one side, we're on the other.
I also think that showed a serious contradiction in the way the news media deals with certain sensitive issues. Right within the media, that's fair to address. Someone mentioned, would it be right if we had the plans for the attack? What happens if the media would publish it? Well, I think there's, I'm not going to point any fingers, I think there's some media that would probably say, geez, we don't want to do this. But I think the problem with it, there's other media that would, through no political agenda, would want to publish it because we've got it. And that's, that's at the root of a lot of the issues in the media right now, is this, where do I make a decision not to publish or not to print because it's probably right, and I don't, but somebody else will, which then rolls into the bigger issue of competition, who's going to survive and who's the best. And what does that lead to? You. Because who are you going to buy? If I have the map of the war and my competitor has a map of the war and I don't publish it, you will, I know this just from last week's Pamela Smart case, you will buy my competitor because you want to see the map, even if you're outraged that they did it. I won't sell that day, he or she will, and then the next time I'm going to publish the map.
Kevin, you have a
Yeah,
shot.
I don't think you can blame the Pentagon for trying to enforce regulations on the media. I think you have to blame the media for accepting.
Oh, I agree. Good point. And that was, I guess, what I wasn't very articulately getting to. We didn't get our act together in enough time to say, this isn't the way we're going to do it. I agree.
You wouldn't allow the police station to dictate you're going to cover the bank robbery. Once a week, we're going to bust your reporter into the police station, be brief, and we'll take them up occasionally to the police barricade. Hear the captain say it's well under control, despite the fact that there's 3 bodies in the lobby.
Despite the experience of the media that was over there, that most of them had been, not all, but they had either some familiarity or direct relationship to coverage of Vietnam. They really don't seem to have learned too much. It was, again, I don't know what's going on, you're dictating it to me, I'm accepting that, I'm passing it along. Eventually that would have broken down and you would have got more of the realistic reporting. But, the news media in particular, broadcast and print, were really basically kind of simple. Where if you give us enough of the right stuff as public relations people, you know this, we're